Good evening, my friends. We like to start with gratitude, and I'm already behind on the gratitude after the beautiful words from Rona and Nina, from Michael and Sarah. I look around this room, this beautiful room here at the Many Cancer Center that we've had many Lab Shul events at, and I see faces and voices. I see faces from the community who've joined us to pray together, to protest together in this past year. I see those of us who've been there for each other at times of mourning and at times of glowing mitzvahs and everything in between. I see those of you here from the Love Squad and the Justice Team, our volunteers, our board, our mavens. I see a lot of familiar and new friends. Welcome to this night. This is our fourth celebration of a community, and it's not a small thing. We've built it, and it keeps growing, and tonight we're celebrating 4 years together, and we're celebrating what it means to be together in its widest sense, as you've already started hearing from these monologues. A few more of those are coming. So I want to say thank you for all those of you who've shown up for tonight, who are here tonight, both in person and watching us online, for those of you who've supported this process, and for the many of you who've supported me throughout not just the last few years building Lab Shul, but in this last year, working on this proposal that I'm excited and honestly super nervous to share with you and with the world tonight. So, as we say at Lab Shul, thanks and wow. So 1 year ago, oh wait, I'm supposed to be doing the slides, right? Well, the light's not gonna be able to make it happen, but imagine. 1 year ago, just about now, we had our third annual celebration, and I was very honored to be celebrated and to be celebrating my rabbinic ordination. It was a great event just across town, and many of us who were here were there. A lot has happened this past year in our lives. For many of us, this time since last year has called on us to step up our citizenship, to raise our voices, to rise up for the values we cherish in ways we perhaps were not imagining we will have to do, and we're not sure of how exactly to do. And yet, as a community, as a nation, we are. These are weird, challenging times. People talk of these times, as we already heard tonight, as a paradigm shift. And so this is indeed a paradigm shift. For the Jewish community, and here we are on the Lower East Side, where so much of the story began, this too is a paradigm shift. Before the elections, it was pretty clear that there will be Jewish grandchildren in the White House. Now, that's not a small thing for a minority group that started here on the Lower East Side. The only question was, what kind of Jewish grandkids are going to be in the White House? Which model? The old school model, the binary model, the Orthodox model, where one is either in or out, yes or no, and Ivanka Trump represents the very valid choice to say, I'm in, and to convert, as she did. Or was it going to be the other model? Forget the politics. The one in which Chelsea Clinton married a gentleman who's Jewish, and they're growing their kids Jewish. Not either or, both and, mixed. Well, we know where we are. And it's interesting that what's happening in the White House is an indication of the Jewish community in many ways. There are scholars here tonight, you'll hear from a few of them, who've been predicting and indicating that what's happening in the Jewish community of the 21st century are different reactions to modernity. And because of the statistics and the numbers and the demographics that we are aware of, and because of where things are going, it is not impossible that the Trump-Kushner model is the future of American Jewry. Orthodox Jewry is surely having way more babies than us liberals. And people who stay within the community build a community in ways that those of us who open up might not. So from a numbers game point of view, what's going on right now is an important indication. But it's also important to remember that there are values at play. And being exclusive versus inclusive, being binary versus non-binary is not just about political decisions or Jewish identity. It is at the root of who we are and what we are. And so the values that we are called to rally around and honor have to do with what is going on at this moment, not just in DC, but everywhere in this country, and frankly in the world. The paradigm shift is one of a shift from the Jewish world our great-grandparents knew to the one our great-grandchildren will know. The paradigm shift is happening right now. Over 50% of American Jews are marrying people for love. 70+% of people who are not Orthodox, liberal Jews, us, do the same. Those are high stakes. And many people in the Jewish world are concerned about discontinuity and the future. But alongside the many who choose love over at least initially tribe, and there's many of us in this room, and at times myself included, it's not so binary. Many of us who choose love also choose to be part of the tribe. Might not be converting. Conversion is a choice that some make and many don't for a lot of interesting reasons, but are joining nevertheless by showing up, as we already heard, as we already know. And so this is confounding, this is puzzling, this is in many ways new, and in many ways challenging what we knew was Jewish. So now what? The definition of boundaries, the exclusive versus inclusive, the binary versus fluid, is at the core of the divide among Americans. And in many ways, it is becoming more so at the core of the divide among American Jews. So I started off with a thanks and the wow, which is how Lab Shul always begins our meetings. And then the third one after that is oops. What's going on that I can do something about? What is going on that is jarring my sense of well-being? So these statistics, these realities, are for many old news and reality as is, and for others a challenge. When I was ordained a year ago from JTS, after years of studies and thinking about many issues, including this one, I had to make a decision. My fidelity to the conservative movement, whose philosophy I deeply believe in, and to which leadership and comradeship I'm deeply grateful, required that I go by the rules. Conservative rabbis, at this point, if they stick by the rules, are not allowed to officiate weddings between Jews and those of other heritage. But if I was to be loyal to my community, to look my friends in the eyes and be honest of where I am in the fluidity of both and, in the modernity, in the post-ethnicity of this is how we are evolving, saying no was not an option. Saying yes with and from love had to be the option. So I was, like many other colleagues, some of them in the room, in a bind. And I did what I love to do. I went researching. I went looking for options. I went looking for sources. I did what many have done and are doing, really look into our tradition, into our ancient toolbox that is thousands of years old, that has weathered many civilizations and changes, and see what in our DNA can speak to this moment. is anything that can help me and others make decisions. As I was doing that, just at this time last year, I got an invitation to officiate at a wedding. And I officiated many weddings in the past. There are a whole bunch of you in the room who invited me to be privileged and stand under your chuppah. Before I went to JTS and before I started on rabbinical journey, I officiated weddings between Jews and those of other faith and heritage, creating a process where we find what's in common, and many of those couples and families, including some in this room, joined the community, joined the Jewish community, without necessarily converting. But when I joined JTS, I took a decision, I made a decision to stick by the rules until I figure out more of what to do here. And when I was ordained, I went to our board. You guys will remember a particularly complicated meeting in which I said, I need to decide this, if only because I'm getting more invitations to officiated weddings. One of them from dear friends who we're going to invite up here in a moment, who said, you are a rabbi, and this is our Jewish community, and we are part of the Jewish community, even though Judaism is not our exclusive conversation. It isn't even our primary conversation, but it is a significant one in our emotional, spiritual, intellectual life. This is our family, and we want a Jewish wedding because it matters to us, and we want you there. And I had to look them in the eyes and say, I don't know what to say. And then I figured out, I got to figure this out. That was really the invitation. So I went to the books, and I found a lot of teachings from many, 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 many sources. And at some point tonight, you too will receive this book that I'm delighted to be sharing tonight. Precedent can never be dismissed. Sometimes it will be a reference point from which innovation will proceed, because careful and respectful innovation is what is demanded. Rabbi Gordon Tucker, an esteemed teacher of mine and esteemed leader in the conservative movement, wrote this in 2006. This is one of several documents, responsa, that helped open the doors in the conservative movement to the LGBTQ community. In 2006, not his particular text, but those of others, convinced the movement that gay dignity is as important as all human dignity, and Jewish halakha, Jewish law, that for thousands of years was not able to celebrate this type of dignity, needs to change. And so the movement changed, and people like me were able to come and be rabbis at the conservative seminary and others. I'm deeply grateful for that courage and for that understanding of flexibility and change. And what Rabbi Tucker is writing about here, about precedent, is that, to quote Blue Greenberg, another important modern sage, where there is rabbinic will, there is rabbinic way. And precedent is important. Where we come from is important, but there's got to be creative ways to walk the past into the present and the future. So the precedent I was interested in, and I am basing this research on, goes back to the Greco-Roman times, when Jews lived in a very pagan society and apparently had a lot of admirers who infiltrated the ranks. And the people who joined the Jewish community in those days were known by a category created by the rabbis in response to those changes. The rabbis took an obscure biblical verse, a bunch of verses, and created a category known as ger toshav, the resident alien or the permanent resident. The ger toshav, ger is Hebrew for stranger, other, or convert, was not a category for people who officially converted into Judaism, but it's a category of those who were absolutely part of the community and referenced in multiple sources, both historical and legalistic. We don't have any direct invitation by the rabbis of yore for Jews to marry a ger toshav. But we have texts that talk about retroactively celebrating those weddings. The numbers may have been way smaller than they are now, but one precedent, not exactly where we are now, caught my attention. So I spent a good amount of time with a great research team and some scholars looking at that category. Then we looked at the pious ones around the same centuries, into the 3rd and 4th century CE in the Roman Empire. People joined the Jewish community because they loved the idea of the Sabbath. And they loved the idea of monotheism in a pagan society. And they liked some of what Jews had to offer. They did not necessarily convert. They were known as Yir'ei Hashem, the pious ones. And they too are recorded and documented at great length, more in historical than in halachic sources. That was chapter 2. And then we went on to look at other liminal categories throughout the generations where it was clear that what we're experiencing today, even though the numbers are unprecedented, has precedent. And that rabbis in more binary civilizations prior to ours were looking for ways to make it work. And so at some point I realized that what I'm looking at are the predecessors of our reality today, and that even though it is difficult from a halachic legalistic point of view to link the past into the present as a slam dunk of legalistic deduction, and I'll spare you the details for now, it was clear that there are enough precedents for us to say, based on this, we want to offer this model. In Hebrew, I would say, beruach ger toshav, inspired by the models prior. This is a moment that requires change and requires us saying, for the sake of love, for the sake of opening our doors, let's try this model, and his 21st century model. And here too, the couple who invited me to officiate their wedding helped me out, pushing me to make a decision and coming up with a whimsical but profound way to think about this change. So I'm going to out my friends Chodo and Koshin, who will be up here in a moment and represent perhaps a radical version of what I'm offering. But when I spoke to Koshin and Chodo, who are leaders in the Zen Buddhist community here in New York, who are beloved friends in both the Lab Shul community and the queer community, who are, I know I just outed you, threefold, and have really become members of our community in such a deep way. When I asked Chodo, who was not born Jewish, about what I'm thinking, he said, but you know, Amichai, I'm not a goy, I'm a joy. And I asked, what do you mean I'm a joy? And you said, well, I'm a Jew who's a goy. I'm kind of both. And I said, Chodo, you just gave name to a 2,000-year-old phenomenon, a sort of a 1,000 phenomenon that we're looking for a new name for. I'm not sure everyone's going to love it. Some people are going to think it's trite and silly, but just for the heck of it, I want to try out what it means to be here for joy, for joys, and play with this proposal. So here we go. Joy, a proposal. It's a book, 50 pages long. You're getting one tonight. As we speak, it's live on our website, and I'm quaking in my boots. So I want to say that this is complicated. I'm delighted, and I am aware of how simultaneously this model that has had so much research and love put into, and some of you in the room tonight have had so much to do with getting this to where it is now, is simultaneously a model of continuity and discontinuity. And as we speak, reactions to this proposal, the article that came out in the forward, whatever Gary Rosenblatt, who's here, is going to write in the Jewish Week, God help us, thank you, Gary, and onwards. People are responding with passion. This is a big deal, and I'm aware, and I want to say with humility and with honesty, I'm aware that this is a big deal. For my rabbinate, for our community, for our world, I'm doing it because I believe it's got to be done for our community, for my ministry. And I'm not speaking on behalf of all conservative and other rabbis. We're going to let the rest of the world do that or not. But it is time to do something and not just sit on the side and say no to friends because of the fear of Jewish dilution. It is time to say yes because of love and not no because of fear. That was my motivation. Thank you. When I spoke about this with my older brother several months ago, my older brother, Rabbi Benny Lau in Israel, who was here last year for part of my ordination celebration, and who's deeply supportive and clearly not on the same page as me, he said, wow, first of all, I'm going to have a stomach ache for the next month, but this is very serious, and I want to hear you very seriously, and I'm listening to seriously. Secondly, he did say to me, this is pikuach nefesh, a Jewish term that is reserved for emergencies. And this is not his halachic opinion, he's giving it to me. He said there is a situation here where in order to save a life, according to Jewish law, one may desecrate the Sabbath. If somebody is sick and they need fire, you would light a fire to save a life. And if someone needs to get to the emergency room and you're one who doesn't drive on the Sabbath, you will drive on the Sabbath to save a life. And my brother said to me, this is a stretch, and you use it if you want, and here I am. To save the soul of the Jewish people, you got to break with the law. So we'll see how that argument goes. That's like the heavy one. But importantly, he asked me a question that I want to share with you before I wrap up. He used an example from the halachic, from the Jewish legal corpus, that has to do with how to make cheese. And so, Rob, this is for you. So this is, for those of you who ever made cheese or not, enjoy. In the kosher laws of how things happen, there's this understanding that some components of some containers can be of non-kosher element and they might influence the kosher ingredient. For instance, cheese. So apparently it used to be that if you took milk and curdled it in a container for it to become cheese, the container of choice in the Middle Ages was the intestines of a cow. I don't know. Shira's nodding. You know something about making cheese. And so the rabbis are saying, wait a minute, if I'm taking a cow, which is meat, and I'm going to make milk and cheese, which is dairy, how am I not going to make this cheese treif, not kosher, by mixing milk and meat, not against, talk about non-binaries. You can't mix them up. And so the rabbis say, if the elements in the container, in this meat container, is less than 1/60th of any input on the product, on the milk, then it's okay. The meat is insignificant in the context of the milk. But if there's more than 1/60th of the meat in some reason impacting the milk, then the milk is no longer kosher. In Jewish terms, this is known as a fortifying element, davar hama'amid. What makes something something? What makes something kosher or not? And my brother said to me, here's your big question. When you're going to say yes to the weddings of Jews and Joys, as you must, because this is the reality, what is going to be the fortifying element? How do you know that a generation or 2 or 3 from now, what you are celebrating will continue Judaism to some extent? It might not be the exclusive. It might not even be the primary, but will it be significant? Will the kids know? Will the home be? Will Judaism continue, or are you opening the door to our demise? What will be the fortifying element that makes a joy, and a Jew who is with him or her interested in continuing the Jewish conversation to some extent? It's a great question. In the next 5 years, I hope to explore this question with many of you. My Joy friends, my Jew friends, my Goy friends, my all friends. Our community is invited to this conversation with scholars who are going to help us ask questions, with understanding that some of the past is going to have a hold on us, but the future will have a say as well. And so the proposal that I'm offering tonight is really an invitation for conversation with leaders in the various movements in our community and beyond. I don't feel qualified to be making the decision by myself. I want us to do it together. And the next 5 years will be an ongoing exploration of what it means to move into the future. I want to say a word about my rabbinic affiliation with a conservative movement that is a source of some concern to me and others. And because I'm taking a position that is not in line with the standards of the Rabbinical Assembly of the conservative movement, I am and I will continue to be in close dialogue with the leaders of the movement to make sure that this is heard and used as usefully as possible. And if the only way out is for me to resign from the Rabbinical Assembly, then I will sadly do so with respect, with gratitude, and with the understanding that this is a machloket l'shem shamayim, a disagreement for God's sake, for the sake of good, and hopefully for the sake of further unity, despite our disunities at moments. And so I want to say one last thing about love. Today is 6/13. We chose this date because we could get the space, which I wanted to be at. But 6/13 is the number in the Jewish numerology of the number of mitzvot, or commandments. And one of the core commandments is ve'ahavta, you shall love. It's been the core of our community this past year. Ve'ahavta and you shall love begins with a vav, with an and. And I want to propose that this vav that we already talked about, all you need is vav, this and calls on us to expand our doors and our hearts and our welcome to all those who we love and who love us and who are part of our community. Love is what got us into this mess, and love is what's going to get us beautifully in and out of it by opening our hearts with love to what is, not to what we wanted. And so this mitzvah of ve'ahavta, of love, is again core to what I'm doing here, to what hopefully we're doing here. Less fear and more love, with careful step by step. At the end of the day, this is my community. We are global and we're connected in many ways, but I am making this decision for you, my community. And whoever is watching online, whether you're close or far, I want people to understand that. I am not a posek, a jurist. I am not making a decision for the wider community, but I could not continue to be the rabbi of Lab Shul, our everybody-friendly community, by not taking a serious stand on this issue for me, for us, for whatever our future is. But I want to make that point quite clear. This is a local issue. We're a home, and I want us to be a home that grows with all the love possible. Homes have welcome signs on the door. And here's one of the ancient welcome signs from the Talmud that says, Gdola hachnasat orchim mikabalat pnei shechina. Welcoming guests is even more important than welcoming the feminine or the divine. It's a radical notion. It's binary, either or. I want to take it post-binary and say, we at Lab Shul are a God-optional community. We'll let you choose what it is mystery means for you, but we are not love-optional. And so, with love, I invite us to welcome ourselves into this phase, into this paradigm shift, into this welcoming with divine inspiration, with communal agreement for a 5-year conversation that will help us say yes to love and yes to joy. Thank you.